So this whole jury trial thing, I'm quite surprised that they defend our juries and Tim Crossland haven't done more on this. And also you've got like Alan Robertshaw and Black Belt Barrister. Alan Robertshaw made a video about it and he was like, you know, getting people to engage and act, you know, to try and help, you know, stop them taking the juries away. There were a few petitions, but I don't think they didn't do as well with those jury petitions, getting the signatures in on the Parliament website as much as they did with the petition asking to release all court documents for free, right? There's got to be... I mean, we're in a country of, you know, over 60 million people, 70 million nearly now with all the immigration, right? Probably getting nearly to more than that. All of the qualified legal professionals in England who are, you know, wanting to protect the jury trials, a lot of them do support it and want to protect them. So how many letters the government must have got, you know, and David Lammy, from absolute, complete qualified legal professionals. But a lot of people who are, you know, passionate about the Magna Carta, all those people who are into sort of the ancient rights and liberties, and a lot of the barristers and lawyers don't think that they're very legitimate people. They come out of a lot of jargon or whatever. So you've got, you know, separate groups, but who are still all advocating protecting the juries. But David Lammy is sort of apparently he hasn't actually done it yet, but he's initiated the motion in Parliament, right? That's what George Galloway said, that he'd already done it, but he hadn't. It was misleading. I found the newspaper article straight away that said that it hadn't actually been done yet, and I've just checked up on it, right? Now, Brian Leveson was the one who did the assessment of the justice system, but it was supposed to be an independent assessment, but he's not independent. He can't possibly be because he's in charge of investigatory powers and giving investigatory powers to the police and authorities to use to prosecute criminals, right? He's engaged in aiding and assisting the prosecution. How can he be independent, right? He can't possibly be. And these words, impartial and independent, are going to be what this all falls down to. There is the Magna Carta, right, which says that you've got a right to be judged according to law or by the judgment of your peers, right? Now, if you need to get a chronological historical order of things that happened all through history, including like the Clarendon Assizes and the Magna Carta, and then the Justices of the Peace Act, and then all the other things that happen in a chronological order. And what you discover is that before the Clarendon Assizes, there wasn't really a proper circuit with the Assizes, or what we call the Crown Court. So you weren't actually getting cases, you didn't have anywhere to appeal to other than the King, I suppose. You got the Statute of Westminster II, right? So you can always do that bill of exception to the King, but that's only in a point of law, right? Or rights, not on the witness statement or evidence. It's only on point of law or rights when you challenge the judge, right? If the judge is like misbehaving or lying, right? But this idea of being put in the gaol for and being indicted, a bill of indictment for a serious offence, is what the whole point of the jury trial is. But it's meant to be the petty jury who investigate it, and the why did I say that? It's meant to be the grand jury who investigate it and the petty jury who bring the verdict. But they're meant to be chosen at random. This is the whole impartiality aspect. They're meant to be selected at random to be impartial and independent, right? Because most of the other laws, as the Normans conquered and they implemented more laws with more kings and more serious laws, you're not just going on the law of the land which existed, which you could, in the Charter of Liberties, like they retained all the laws of Edward the Confessor and the customs. So when you're normally in the 100 court, in the petty sessions, it's usually the law of the land and customs that you've broken, the existing laws, because when the Normans conquer, then they're enacting the new laws and more serious laws and the King's law, and this is when you get the people put in the gaol and criminals and so forth. But it's also a court to appeal to as well, right? But you may have the jury there. Now, they have the jury in the King's Bench and all the other higher courts as well, right? But now you just get justice. So you've got the Magna Carta thing there. Now, I think this is purely my speculation, but I don't we're going to bring the ECHR into it in a minute, but I think that by the time they got to Magna Carta and they'd established the indictment, right, and the jury trials and everything, right, I think that whether by the law of the land or judgment of your peers was the difference between just going to the petty sessions and having summary and having the law applied, judged by the law, or if it's an indictment, you get indicted, and then you get a fair judgment by your peers, right? Who are independent and impartial. I mean, sometimes they could have it not with a jury, but, they even had the juries in civil trials and higher up as well, right? You didn't have the jury with the Court of Royal Commission or Star Chamber because that was just the king. But you could always challenge a judge on the point of law or that the judge was wrong through that bill of indictment and appeal to the king anyway through a bill of exception, right? I don't know. Did I say bill of indictment? Then I meant bill of exception. But all indictments are a bill of indictment anyway. I think Magna Carta is that. Why it says by the law of the land or judgment of peers, I think it's summary versus indictment. That's the difference. That's why they've got it. And I've only just kind of realised that rather than, the jury deciding on matter of point of law or on their conscience. But that comes with having judgment of your peers anyway, right? But this is that's the only argument you have until you bring this EU law in. And we've got this stupid, ridiculous Assisted Dying Act, which is completely and totally against Article 2 of the ACHR at the moment, right? The European Convention of Human Rights. It says that a government can only have law that kills people through criminal procedure, not civil. Yet they're trying to bring it in civil without changing that law. There's big complaints about that. There's got to be misconduct in public office and perjury of oath in that because they're not acting according to law and they're sworn in on oath. Now, that's the Assisted Dying Bill. Now, we've got this other issue, which is the jury trials, which David Lammy has initiated, right? Now, I'm calling them out for perjury of oath again and misconduct in public office because they're trying to make us believe that they can do it or even try it. They can't. And it's yet another ACHR violation. Well, it's a violation of our constitutional rights of England, but there doesn't seem to be any process that we can do to stop them because the courts aren't meant to get involved in Parliament. We're meant to have them impeached, or we're meant to put petitions in to stop them, or, you got Daniel Greenberg, they're not meant to break the constitutional law, and they're meant to be held to account for it in Parliament, and we have got processes to do that, but they're not letting us run the e-petitions. So the thing that we have got since only 1998 is that you can hold them to account through the normal courts, like they've just done with Shabana Mahmood putting that prescribed group into the schedule and acting it into law, even though what she did wasn't an act of a public authority, it was clearly a legislative act, but they still held her to account in it. But yet, surely that's violating her privilege, right? There are questions around this ECHR law, but so let me just move on to this jury trial, fully focused now, right? And this is fact. Aside from all the Magna Carta stuff, you need that supporting evidence. Now, the European Convention of Human Rights, the Human Rights Act 1998, ECHR, Article 6 and 7 is to do with justice and administration of justice, right? Now, it says in Article 6 about tribunals and, having fair trials. Now, I've checked on it. I've checked the wording and the meaning of it. And I asked it multiple times to check all the websites on the internet and check all information on the internet. I did a repeated experiment, to test the results to see how they stood up to asking it through different words and different, asking the same question using different words to mean the same thing to see if it came up with the same answer, right? It has confirmed to me that it's well known and acknowledged that Article 6 of ECHR, when it says the word tribunal, it means cases. It means hearings. It means when you go to court, not just what we have in England, if you get a parking ticket or a ULEZ fine, it goes to a tribunal, a special tribunal. It's not just one of those. In the European context of that law, the wording enacted, it has confirmed to me that it means when you go to court, when you have a case, a trial, right? That's what it is meant to mean, right? Not just like some weird parking ticket tribunal or something like that, right? It means cases, courts, hearings, right? Now, it says in Article 6, it says that it must be both impartial and independent, right? It doesn't say impartial or independent, and that's a big word. It's not impartial or independent. It's impartial and independent. It has to be both. Like in Magna Carta, it says, according to law, or the judgment of your peers. That's an or word, right? It can be one or the other. It doesn't say and, although some people have got it in and, but I've checked the translation multiple times and it's or, right? Now, with ECHR, every person must have a right to be heard, tried, right? Impartially and independently. Now, this is where I really got some insights and revelations for this, right? Because we've got a little courtroom picture here, right? Because you've got like the jury box, and this is a Crown Court model, not the Magistrates Court model, right? So this is for like an indictment. So this is for the jury trials. Now, this is, right, this is what Keir Starmer and David Lammy need to learn, right? Rather than just thinking they can do what the hell they want. Even when you've got Brian Leveson, assessing things. But Leveson needs to learn something as well, right? And not just act as an authoritarian like he can do what he wants, right? Now, this is fact. In the court, right, in a civil case, in civil proceedings, Mr. Smith versus Mr. Johnson, right? Party A and Party B, plaintiff and respondent. Now, if Mr. Smith is claiming that Mr. Johnson owes him £20 in a civil case, right? You have a plaintiff and defendant. Now, they go before a court. The court is meant to be impartial, right? It's not meant to have an interest in Mr. Smith or Mr. Johnson, right? It's there to hear a case and decide what is the truth and fact of the case, right? Now, the law that is being used is the legislation enacted in England. Acts of law, even in civil law, like, it might be copyright violation or employment rights, or just like, if he owes you some money, like, now they have got customs of England which you can get upheld, and, the laws ready with the confessor, all kinds of things. But mainly, it's mainly legislation and acts of law. You might have a company A and company B. Mr. Smith and Mr. Johnson might have two different companies, and he didn't pay him the money, and he owes him the money, right? So, like, or he's got some of his stock in his container, and he won't give him it, and it's his stock, and he has to prove that he owns it or whatever, right? Or it could be tax, VAT. It could be all, but we're getting into, I don't want to use tax as a model because that's owing the government money, but like we're talking about just in persons, right? Now, they're all using, we're all the king's subjects, but these are private persons, right? And it's the law of England. Now, the justice is not meant to have an interest in Party A or Party B. He's meant to be purely independent, and he's meant to be impartial. But now, this is the thing. The judge, this is really important. The judge in a civil trial is still one of the king's justices, and he is taking the oath of supremacy to the king, right? And he is there as the king's representative, right? It's like having the king there. It's almost like having the king there, but he's in the king's place. He's the king's justice, and it's the king's law, right? Like when you had the common pleas in Westminster, right? Now, you sometimes you did have juries in civil trials, but you don't now, right? Now, there's this other aspect which is really important, that if someone walks in and they know the judge, then they have to change the judge because he's not allowed to know any of the parties or be friends with them, right? And I've heard evidence of that before. So that's like impartiality, right? Now, the judge is independent as much as we're in the king's kingdom and it's the king's law, right? And they're using the king's law and the judge is on behalf of the king, but doesn't really have any interest in either of the parties. And they're there to get a dispute settled through the king's law by the king's justice. But the king doesn't have an interest in either case other than they're asking for the law to be applied and done by, right? Now, that's in civil. Now, it's different, totally different, when it's criminal. And this is what we're talking about, jury trials. What David Lammy is talking about is a jury trial for criminal matters, which is actually an indictment because you don't get a jury in the magistrate's court on summary anyway, right? Now, Lammy's ignored Magna Carta because he thinks that it says you can be tried according to law or by your peers. So David Lammy thinks in his head, well, the jury trial doesn't have to have your peers. It could be just by law, right? Just purely by the law of the land, right? That's what Lammy thinks. He doesn't think that, well, actually, that meant the normal summary because that's by the law of the land. You don't have peers in there. And if you get an indictment, then that is with your peers because that's what the whole point of the Clarendon Assizes is, right? Now, but let's bring this ECHR in, right? ECHR says that it has to be independent and impartial. Now, I'm going to prove that now. That if Lammy takes the jury away, I'm going to prove now that it's not independent and impartial. And this is the reason why. I'll tell you, right? When you've got a jury in there, the jury are both independent and impartial. Both, right? Because they're chosen at random. They're not meant to know the defendants or the victim. And therefore, they're impartial. And they're independent. Now, how are they independent? I'll tell you, right? They take an oath. They've got to be sworn in. They take an oath, but the oath is to serve justice, right? The oath is to serve justice. It's not an oath of supremacy to the king, right? It's not an oath of supremacy to the king at all, right? Now, the justice is sworn in on an oath of supremacy to the king, right? He's the king's servant and he represents the king, right? He's there instead of the king, right? To be there on behalf of the king, right? Now, so they're totally different oaths. The judge is literally on behalf of the king and representing the king and the law, and the jury are there independently and impartially. Now, if the judge knows any of the defendants, or like, you know, if it turns out that the judge knows the accused, you have to change the judge because he can't be impartial and independent then, right? If the judge knows it. But, so that's another factor. But this is the thing, right? And you need to draw this out or make a picture or something, right? Criminal law in this country, it's the king's law, right? It's the king's laws in crime, criminal matters. When you break the law of the king, right, the king's peace, you break the peace and you must answer for it to the king, right? And that is the basis of a Crown prosecutor bringing a charge against you, or on the sheriff, the police, and you going into a court, and in the court charge, it says Crown versus defendant, or Mr. Smith versus Crown, or it might say Regina, right? Because it's you versus the king, right? It's you versus the king. It's not you versus the defendant, the victim, right? It's not Mr. Smith, who's committed a crime, versus the victim, might be Mrs. Simpson, right? The victim, the person who, has been offended, they aren't prosecuting you. Like in a civil case, when it's Mr. Smith versus Mr. Johnson, he owes each other money, respondent and defendant is between the two parties with the court as a convener. In criminal law, the victim is only someone who has made a complaint that the king's law was broken. Someone broke the king's law, right? And they've broken the law of the king, right? And they have to answer criminally, and that is why it is you versus the crown. Sir, Mr. Smith, you've broken the king's law. Are you guilty or innocent? And, you defend yourself and you answer to, yes, there are a victim, but the victim is not prosecuting you, right? And it's not you versus the victim, although they might get a victim surcharge and they might get some money, but you broke the king's law. That's what you're there for, right? And it's really important is that, because the justice represents the king and the king's law, and the crown prosecutor is prosecuting you on behalf of the king, right? Now, you might say, well, how is it, how can it even be impartial anyway? Because the justice is not meant to know you, and you're meant to be, a stranger to the justice or whatever, and you're meant to present your case, and he's meant to decide the case impartially, but he's not independent. The judge is not independent because you broke the king's law and you're in the king's justice and you're in front of the king's judge and you've got to answer to the king, but the prosecutor presents the case versus the king, right? And that's really important to understand. And therefore, it's not impartial and independent. The judge is, the judge is meant to hear the case in front of him and he's meant to be as impartial as possible. And if he knows you, if he's a personal friend of yours, he can't hear it impartially, he's got to go. But even if he doesn't know you and he is impartial, because he doesn't know you, so he can decide on it impartially and be a professional adjudicator in between, he isn't independent because you broke the king's law. And the king's law is in force and effect, and he effectively is meant to be the king or on behalf of the king. He's there instead of the king, and you broke the king's law, right? He isn't independent. He isn't independent because it's a king's court. The court belongs to the king. You broke the king's law, and he's there to hear the case, but the prosecutor brings the case on behalf of the king. It's you versus the king. So the crown aren't independent, right? The judge is meant to be impartial. Now, the jury have not taken the oath of supremacy to the king. They don't owe any service to the king in that courtroom or trial. They take an oath to try the victim honestly to the truth and evidence, etc. They are both impartial, selected at random, don't know the offender or victim, supposedly. And they also get screened and checked. And secondly, they are independent. They're impartial and independent, right? The judge is only impartial. He's not independent because it is the crown versus the accused. And the justice is not independent from the crown, right? He's taken an oath to serve the king and serve the king's justice on someone who's broken the king's law. He's not independent of the matters because it's the king's law that is under scrutiny, right? And you might say, well, everyone's meant to be the king's subjects. Well, we've got different religions and all kinds of stuff now, and people from other countries who are witnesses on holiday, they might have been, the king of Egypt or something, I don't know, right? But that's the fact. And Lammy thinks that, well, it's okay, we're just reducing them, we're going to have them in, extremely, urgent situations or where expressly necessary, right? But this is the thing. If you're getting indicted, an indictment, you've always meant to have a jury, right? And then if you're not happy with the magistrate's court, how it turns out, you've got a right to appeal to a jury to be tried your peers because you weren't in the first place. You were accountable to the law and you weren't happy with how the law was applied. So then you're appealing to the peers who are both impartial and independent. You've got a right to do that. If Lammy takes that away, you don't. And even if you get judged by your peers, by a jury, and you don't like the outcome of it, you can still appeal. When you appeal to the High Court now, from the Crown Court, you're appealing to a King's Justice, right? And the King's Justice is meant to be impartial, but he's not independent. And under ECHR, if that's the case, then you already did have a right to an independent and impartial trial with the Crown Court. And that was your right to an independent and impartial trial at the Crown Court if indictment or if appeal from a magistrate's court. And if you're not happy with the jury, the public, then you can appeal to one of the King's Justices now still. But some of them are meant to have a jury, like at the King's Bench, Westminster, etc. Supposed to have a jury as well, right? But they don't. You're appealing to a King's Justice and you're appealing to an impartial King's Justice, but he's not independent. And then you've already had your chance for impartial and independent when you were at the Crown Court, right? And I can guarantee you that, right? And Lammy's wrong. He's wrong about it. And the ECHR guarantees you at some stage, you should have the right to impartial and independent. And if he takes them juries away from all the main trials, and you've had your chance at the Crown Court, and under his new scheme you didn't have a jury, you're not going to appeal to impartial and independent from that juryless trial, because the next up you'll get the High Court and it will only be impartial and not an independent King's Judge. The King's Judge is not independent. The King's Judge is only impartial at the High Court, not impartial and independent. You get the opportunity for impartial and independent at the Crown Court, and you definitely don't get it at the Magistrates' Court. You only get impartiality from the magistrates, right? Because the magistrates are sworn in as well, and they're not even properly educated in the law properly, right? So, and we're meant to have the grand jury and petty jury. Judgment by peers is meant to be the grand jury investigating it, and then the petty jury coming to the verdict, and they've already taken that away. They've taken it in civil law. They've taken it to the High Courts. It's already hanging on like a thread, right? You know, like when your tooth comes loose, right, and it's wiggling around and there's only that little strand there holding it on, right? That's what it's on at the moment. And Lammy thinks that by removing that last little strand that's holding your tooth into effect, that, occasionally, on a rare incidence or very, very, very rarely, once in a blue moon or whatever, you can still have a jury, and it's just hanging on by a thread. No, that's gone. He's taken the whole thing away, right? And we're on the thread now, and I'm telling you that only the jury is both impartial and independent. And the word tribunal in that Article 6 is all trials and cases and hearings, right? And you've got a right to it. And if you don't go to Crown Court twice. If you go to Crown Court and you get convicted and they want a jury, you don't have a right to have a jury again because your opportunity is gone, right? And you have to go to High Court, and you've only got an impartial judge who is not independent. He's a King's Justice because he's on oath of supremacy, right? You're not going to get a jury sworn in who are completely impartial and independent. So Lammy's wrong. The whole thing's illegal. Brian Leveson is wrong, right? Lammy is wrong. Starmer is wrong. They're all wrong. They're doing it against ECHR, just like they're doing it with the Assisted Dying Act against Article 2 and trying to distract away from it. I think they're criminals. I think that there's two arguments. Either they can plead stupid and they're not competent. They can plead that, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have stepped forward to be an MP. I shouldn't have accepted the role of Chancellor. I'm not legally qualified for this job. I'm not competent for it. And I plead stupidity and I apologise. I'll accept that. Or they know it's illegal and they're still trying to do it anyway, like with assisted dying, because they don't respect the law. They're not upholding it. They're criminals. They've broken the law by perjury of oath. They're not acting according to the law. It's misconduct in public office and it's perjury of oath, right? And if they're playing dumb, oh, sorry, we didn't know, then it's still misconduct in public office because they're incompetent, right? So I'm getting sick of it. It needs to stop now. And these people need to be criminally accountable and not keep evading it like Boris Johnson. Oh, I'll have to step down, right? You know, in front of the Privileges Committee. Either they need to be impeached, which at the moment they don't want to do it because they want to try and pretend it's gone away. They don't actually want it to become a reality that they're facing these charges yet. You know, other people have had to face charges, you know, like the Lords had to do it for expenses scandal and stuff like that. When that was all done wrong, because they should have just taken Hanningfield into the High Court, you know, because he owed money to the Crown or whatever. And then once that had been done, then they could have sorted his criminal bit out. But the newspapers did it all wrong. And, you know, Jeremy Johnson, KC, is not... his 6-page paper needs to be put in the dustbin because it's a load of rubbish. It ignores like Bankruptcy Act basis and, you know, the King's Debt and the Privileges Act. It ignores all that. It is ignorant. These people operate by ignorance. What they do is that if there's an obstacle, they pretend that it's not there. They pretend that it doesn't exist, or they draw attention away from it, you know, and then when we get into that subject, they go, and just like, you know, just push it to the side or whatever, right? Like they're doing with the Declaration of Compatibility for the Right to Life. These people, they don't deserve to be in the government of England. They're dangerous in these positions, and diversity and inclusion has dramatically had an impact on the integrity of this country and this nation from the standards which are expected of it, right? That it's been severely impacted. And I'm not pointing, you know, my finger at any, you know, race, religion or ethnic groups or whatever, because I think that it's difficult because some people are misled or whatever, you know. We've got King's Counsel, barristers, all kinds of people. They've all been complaining about this jury trial thing anyway. And, you know, a lot of people complain to Brian Leveson, but look, you can't let these people deceive us. You can't let these people bullshit us. And I don't want to use that swear word, right? But they're bullshitting us, right? David Lammy is doing something that is not allowed to do by law, right? He's not allowed to do it, and he thinks that he can do what he wants just because he's been to private school and, you know, been to whatever, Harvard or wherever he's in America, and he's got a fancy accent and it sounds convincing. He's been taught to sound convincing and believe what he wants, that he can do what he wants, and he can't. And that was the problem with Tony Blair, right? The law says that he can't do it, right? And it needs enforcing, and also by even attempting it. I mean, under that, I just looked at another act the other day, which only applies to Northern Ireland now, not England, but it was to do with libels and so forth. But there was law like, you know, if you try and change the law of the country by illegitimate means, if you attempt to change the law of the land, the law of the country, the constitution, by illegitimate means, unlawful means, that's a very serious crime. Now, Lammy thinks that, oh, I'm changing the law by being a member of parliament and putting it through, but he's not, because the law that he's putting through is lying and telling you fibs, and he's pretending that like it's according to law, but it's not. It's not according to the law of Article 6 of VCHR, is it? And it's not according to the law of Magna Carta. And at the moment, they've stitched us up, so it's really difficult to enforce our own constitutional law because they've blocked us, like blocking e-petitions and just ignoring paper petitions, or ignoring complaints to MPs, or ignoring, you know, when you give feedback to Brian Leveson and tell him to clock out and go home because he's a waste of space. Investigatory powers, you know, he's a waste of money. Well, did he do it voluntarily? Brian Leveson needs his knighthood removed. Now, Brian Leveson needs to go home, clock out, he's sacked, right? He's in an extremely dangerous position, right? Because he's in charge of investigatory powers. The people who are listening to me now talking, right? It's an extremely dangerous position when he's helping the chief police officers, inspector of police, MI5, MI6, security services. He's giving them all these investigatory spy powers that, are a joke because, fucking Mark Zuckerberg's got it in his back pocket, and Elon Musk and Sergey Brin, Google, joke at those sort of powers because they're snooping and spying on us anyway. That's against another article. That's against the right to privacy in Europe, but they're breaking it. No one's been into court. I don't know why that is. They must be pressing buttons and blocking emails and stopping it from happening. Someone's doing something to stop those cases going into court and getting proved that it's all against the right to privacy, which I think is to do with Emma Arbuthnot and her husband and Brian Leveson and all these judge circuits, right? These people aren't impartial and independent. They're impartial at a push, but they're not independent. Never on the face of planet Earth has Brian Leveson ever been impartial and independent. He had no legal right in this country to come out with that report and submit it to Parliament. He's helping, aiding and abetting on police, security services and the prosecution to bring cases against defendants. He is not independent and he's not impartial, right? He needs prosecuting and having his knighthood taken from him, Brian Leveson. Keir Starmer, David Lammy, Kim Leadbeater, right? These people are now misleading the nation and country, deceiving us through a mix of stupidity, incompetence, and authoritarian power, because really they are not capable of the job or intelligent enough for it, and it is extremely dangerous, right, to have these people in these offices. We need higher education standards for these people, right? I won't do the job, right, because I don't want the responsibility for it, and I couldn't check every single thing to make sure it's right. And there are lots of things in the law, legal terms and processes that I haven't got a clue about, but I know about this, right? I'm the sandwich that they're short of, right? They're one sandwich short of a picnic, and I'm that sandwich, right? I am the sandwich that their picnic is short of, right? And I am telling them they are doing it illegally. It's not lawful. The King's Justice alone, with no jury, is not both independent and impartial, right? Only the randomly selected jury, sworn on an oath to serve justice, not on the oath of supremacy, only the jury is both impartial and independent. And in Article 6 under tribunals, which means cases and causes in England, you've got to have that, right? Or have it at some part of it, or have the right to appeal to it. And if you didn't get it when you had your Crown Court trial of an indictment, you ain't going back to the Crown Court, because your next appeal is the High Court, and you're not going to get a jury there. You're only going to get King's Justice, right? So Lammy's wrong. I'm right, and I want Starmer and Lammy prosecuted criminally for perjury of their oath in this country, in the United Kingdom. They are not acting according to law. They walked into Parliament, they stood in front of that bench, they put their hand on the book with the clerk there, they said they will act according to law, right? And they're not. And Lammy needs to be criminally prosecuted for perjury of this country. So does Keir Starmer, and misconduct in public office, right? They need to be criminally accountable. It needs to happen. No lightning bolts striking buildings, fucking railway stations burning down in fucking Edinburgh, lightning bolts hitting the top of fucking, Branson's holiday island retreat. None of this other distraction nonsense, right? Incidents kicking off, Keir Starmer's brother mysteriously dying. None of this Secret Services, witness protection plan nonsense, right? No matter how much the nation is furious, reactive, or in uproar or whatever, these people need to be criminally accountable. The offences exist, right? The offence of perjury of oath exists when someone has not followed their oath. The criminal offence of misconduct in public office is there for when people are in misconduct of public office. It's not a haiku, it's not a figment, it's not a fantasy, it's not pretend, it's not there for show or display. It's there for when someone commits a serious crime in government, of which David Lammy and Keir Starmer are criminals. And any other MPs who attempt to further mislead this nation into believing that they can do that and get away with it, because they can't. They wanted the ECHR law, they wanted the Human Rights Act, and now they're like, oh, can we just ignore it? No, you can't just ignore it. If they wanted to do all these things, they should have repealed it all. Solar Braverman said they should have repealed it. They're not even upholding the right to privacy. They've let the Americans and Chinese come over here and literally backshaft us with all this consent to accept. They want it. The government wants it. Brian Leveson wants it. The Arbuthnot's want it. All the major platform people want it. They want to backshaft us all and snoop on us, spy on us, perv on us, voyeurs. They're obsessed with spying and snooping on other people, right? Says that you can't do it unless there's an urgent social need. There's no right to do it for business statistics, surveying, control blind experiments, or anything else, or get a monopoly on social media and it's the only way you can contact people and then you have to submit consent and accept to it. We've got no other options given to us. The government are even using it for their main contacts and encouraging the use of it. They're all breaking the election law anyway by mass copyright online and piracy for election material. This government needs justice. This government needs to be criminally accountable to the people on trial in public. That Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, David Lammy, all these people who have broken the law against their oath, and they need to be on trial. And someone needs to do it without any intervention of these lightning bolts that are fucking coming down, causing newspaper stories to, set off and scare people and intimidate people and distract them, right? And, people dropping dead, fucking guards and soldiers and footballers all over the country, right? We need to, it's like the fucking Exorcist, right? People crawling the walls and head spinning round or whatever, like, we need to get a grip on this, right? These people need to be criminally accountable and answer to justice and have a fair defence against the charges, because the charges are very real and correct and true against them, right? For perjury and misconduct in office. Tony Blair scrapped the death penalty for treason. Could even be treason, right? This needs to happen without any intervention or distraction from it, right? Lammy is breaking ECHR Article 6, blatantly. They've already tried to do it with assisted dying in Scotland, but they called it off. The Jersey State government put it through. They need to be prosecuted as well, right? There needs to be criminal action, right? It needs to happen. And the staff of Parliament are responsible. The clerks of Parliament are responsible. The Lords are responsible. The staff of 10 Downing Street are responsible. But unfortunately, it seems to be like, according to Liz Truss, that they're the ones who are running the show. These levels and levels and levels of government beyond the Prime Minister. Dominic Cummings were talking about, right? The government beyond the government or whatever, which is Brian Leveson and Arbuthnot's, and I don't know whether Sir Ken McCallum knows who it is or not, but he's already called people out for spying to China, right? We don't know exactly who these permanent people are, these permanent persons who can never be removed, whether they're the executives of departments or what, but whoever they are need to get this message and they need to answer to fact and truth, right? No judge in England is both impartial and independent. He is a servant of the Crown, and they've taken the oath of supremacy. They represent the king. The king's law's been broken. The case is the Crown versus the defendant. They're not both impartial and independent. Only the jury is both impartial and independent. What's left of it, and it's meant to be the grand jury and petty jury. Now we've only got the petty jury, right? Only the petty jury is impartial and independent on the oath to serve justice, right? According to the evidence. And that is the fact that Lammy needs to accept, and he's wrong. Lammy needs to stand down, resign, right? And we need a general election immediately now. Starmer, every single day that Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister in this country is a crime. It's a crime against this country. Every single day that Keir Starmer is the Prime Minister is a crime against this country, right? And we need a general election. We don't just need a general election. We need criminal action against these people. And I don't know who's going to do it, whether it's, Rupert Lowe or what. God knows who's going to do it, because the judiciary are corrupt, because, to even try and get this past us as well. There's a lot of barristers in this country who should be doing it on pro bono. Where are all the barristers stepping forward pro bono with the criminal charges against Keir Starmer for perjury, right? Misconduct in public office and violation of ECHR. They can get violation of ECHR proved in front of a judge while David Lammy's working on it now, surely, right? We need these people to come forward. We need like an arm. All these barristers who opposed getting rid of the jury trials clearly aren't good enough, right? It's enough to them to do petitions, and it's enough to them to, get people to write in. Why aren't they filling the forms in, criminal proceedings, and starting the trial against Keir Starmer? It's privileged. Well, why don't they fill the impeachment forms in? Get the Erskine May book out at the back, Get the impeachment forms filled in for petition, get people signing it, right? Whatever. Or you can do it in the normal courts by ECHR violation. The judge can decide on that. And if the judge decides it was against ECHR, then clearly it was a perjury of oath, right? Clearly it was misconduct in public office. So there's no excuse. Why isn't Alan Robertshaw doing it? Why isn't he not filling the forms in now? Why is Black Belt Barrister not sat in front of the criminal prosecution forms, filling in the witness statement and indictment, asking his viewers to, write in and sign it or whatever they need to do, right? And getting witnesses. Why are these barristers not already initiating criminal proceedings against Keir Starmer? I do not know. And Lammy, right? They need to do it. It needs to be initiated. That's what needs to happen.